Hello everyone, and welcome back to my YouTube channel. Today I'll be showing you how to make this baby cloud lingerie set. This project is geared towards a more intermediate crocheter, but I do think it's explained well enough that if you're a beginner, it's a good way to segue into slightly more difficult projects. I didn't use any lining in this set, but if you would like to learn how to use some in the future, please leave me a quick comment and I'll try and make a tutorial for that. For now, don't forget to subscribe and like the video so you don't lose your spot. Here are the directions for today's project. As per usual, everything is split up into a few different parts. Please pause this wherever you need to and take some screenshots so you don't have to pause the video and rewind a bunch of times. So when we get to certain steps that require you to change things based on your own size, I'll make sure to verbally tell you then, just so that way the directions didn't get too muddied on paper. This will always be in the corner as well. For today's project, you will need a lightweight fluffy yarn, a 5.5mm hook, and then whatever tools you prefer to use. For me, that's a stitch marker, a tape measure, and some scissors, but I know a lot of people like to use the darning needle, so I include that as well, and I'll show you when and how to use it if you choose to do so in a bit. Welcome to part 1 of the video, which is making the cups for your top. First step is very simple. You can either just freeball it or use a tape measure, but you need to start by making a slip knot and then finding out the length from the bottom of your boob to about the middle of it. That's the length of what we're going to be doing to start out the cup part of this, just because as we build up the width, it will build up height as well. So for me, I'm doing a slip knot and then chaining 12 times to get just about the length that I need. For you, this is where you'd start to change things if your size is different. And then just to give you guys a small example of what this looks like on a different project, you can kind of see where the line itself starts, that first little chain that you're going to be doing, and where it ends. It pretty much will go from directly to the bottom to either the middle or just above where the middle of the cup is going to be. And ignore that this one is slightly pulled, it's just older. After we make this one, there should be no holes or anything in it. Your actual first row will consist of doing 1 half double crochet in each and every one of these stitches. You'll start by chaining 1, as we normally do, yarn over and insert your hook into each and every one of the chains in this row. I find that it helps to count these out just because it's easy to skip a chain stitch as opposed to a normal one. Now, instead of chaining 1 and turning your work, you're going to add 2 more half double crochets into that last stitch. This is going to be where the top of the cup starts to make that point shape, and each row this is where you'll be adding the extra ones to give it height as opposed to just adding width. I choose to do 3 for this first one because I've got a pretty solid idea of how wide I want this to be, but if you have some bigger boobs, you might want to do like 5 half double crochets to start and then go from there. After you've done those half double crochets, once again, instead of chaining and turning your work, you're actually just going to be going into the back parts of that original chain row. Still doing half double crochets, and of course, make sure you count so that you have the right amount. You want to make sure that you're not skipping any stitches here and just going into the back, trying to tuck in that extra strand if you can. If you can't tuck in the strand here, don't be afraid to just use your darning needle later and end up just sewing or weaving it in the way you normally would. I just find the lines are a little cleaner to do it this way. Once you've made it to the bottom of that row, once you lay it flat, you kind of notice that it's flat on the bottom and rounded out on the top. This is the shape that you want it to look like. Your next few rows are going to be doing the exact same thing over and over again. Chain 1 and turn your work, and now basically you're just going to be inserting 1 half double crochet into each and every one of these stitches except for the peak stitch, which is the one in the very middle at the very top. If it helps to count, go ahead and do so, but honestly, so long as you pay attention, you shouldn't be skipping any stitches and you shouldn't need to count much of anything at this point. You'll be able to eyeball where that middle stitch is by looking at where on your piece the middle of the last row was. So to explain a little bit better, we did 3 half double crochets into that first one, so the middle of those 3 is the one that you'll be inserting your next round of half double crochets. I'll be doing 5 half double crochets into mine for all of these rows, but you're again going to adjust that based on your own cup size. If yours are a little bit smaller, you'll probably do less rows with 3 half double crochets, and if you're on the bigger side, you might want to do 7 half double crochets and maybe 1 or 2 extra rows as opposed to mine. Like I said, each of these next couple rows are going to be exactly the same as you've been doing them. The reason that these are okay to be the same, even though you're going up in size, is because the stitches you put into the peak stitch are what makes it wider. This ends up making everything super proportional to one another and doesn't have anything come out as a weird shape. Row 8 breaks this pattern, and now you'll be chaining 1 and turning, and then adding 3 single crochets into each stitch so far. Doing this is what gives the effect of those little frills that you saw in the beginning clip. This works because when you add more than 1 stitch to a single stitch, they kind of end up having not enough space to lay flat, which causes them to ruffle up on one another, and this creates cute little frills. Unlike before, when you were doing something extra into that peak stitch, like adding 3 or adding 5 half double crochets, you're just going to add the same amount into that stitch as well. To finish your work, you will do your last stitch and then chain 1 extra. From there, you're going to cut your yarn and then pull the yarn all the way through the loop, creating a tiny knot. This concludes your first cup, which is nice and easy and it lays out super cute. You need to follow these exact same steps once more, making the same alterations to your cup size as you did in the first one to make your second matching cup. Nothing different needs to be done about them. Make this next one the exact same way you made the first one. The next part of this video is to make these straps, or kind of the connecting body piece of the top. You'll start this process by measuring just below your bust to figure out the exact length that you need for this strap. The goal of the strap is to have one consecutive line of chains that you connect the cups themselves to in order to not have any weird dimensions and have everything just be one straight line across. For me, this comes out to just about 34 inches. And then to know how many chains this ends up being, I just recommend taking your yarn and running a chain from the bottom up to where that 34 inch is, or wherever that number comes out to for you. Start, of course, with a slip knot, and then begin to make your chains. I recommend writing down your numbers as you go, and trying to line it up with your tape measure as you go as well. I'll show you with the tape measure in a minute just how to line this all up, but just so you guys know, I end up doing 63 extra chains to get that 34 inches, which might be a little off depending on what tension you guys end up having, but for me it comes out to 63 chains, as well as the extra 100 that you'll be adding on for these sides that you'll use to tie it all together. Looking at the tape measure now, I end up finding the 17-inch mark, which is halfway around my bust, and this is how I start to measure up where I want the cups to be. I want both cups to be just before and just after 17 inches, so they're about in the middle of the piece. So you can see it comes out to about 16 1/4 when I line it up here. What I do to fill the space is what's listed above at the top of your screen right now, where it says chain 50, then chain 30, and then attach your cup. At this point, I've already chained just about 50, so when I get to that spot, I'm adding a stitch marker here because I know that that chain of 50 is going to be used for the straps only. So just to recap before we attach the cup, you want to chain 50, make sure you know where that spot is if you don't feel like counting again, then chain another 30, and that's where we're going to start attaching the cups afterwards. Now you're going to be attaching your first cup. To do so, find the bottom of the first frill, not into the whole piece, just the bottom of it, the one that's in line with the bottom of your cup itself, and insert your hook into that. From there, you're going to begin slip stitching into each of these bottom stitches on your cup. They might be a little bit hard to see, and the lengths can be entirely different depending on how big your cup was or how many stitches you end up doing, but the simple part of this is just to slip stitch in from one side to the other. These will not change the length of your top in any capacity, they just attach the chain to your actual cups, so we end up with one long straight piece of yarn. I also recommend that you make sure you get 2 loops on the hook before slip stitching. This will just make it more secure and has a less chance of pulling the yarn. When you get to the end of your piece, make sure that once again you go into the bottom frill stitch, not the top part, and do your final slip stitch. Once you're done with this, you're ready to move on to attaching your next cup. To attach it, you first want to make sure that you reference your tape measure again so you know how much a gap you need in between both of these cups. For me, this only comes out to 3 stitches, but if you're wider or shorter set, you might want to do 1 or do 5 stitches. Again, this is totally up to how your body looks. Once you've chained however many you need, you can attach the second cup the exact same way as the first one, making sure that your stitches are facing the right direction. You don't want one inside out and the other one looking wonky. To recap, make sure you pull through the bottom of the frill and then go across. Once both cups are attached, make sure you chain 30 and then chain 50 more, or whatever you did to match your own bust, and then at this point you should be done. The row that you have should be super long, which is good because remember it does have to fit around you and tie a nice little knot afterwards. So when you're done, remove your stitch markers and lay it flat and then maybe tie it around your body to make sure it fits the way you want it. From here, you can go back to the stitch that you ended on and get ready for row 2, which is a very long row of half double crocheting. Remember to skip the first stitch on your hook and go into the second one, and you know how to half double crochet at this point. Go all the way here from point A to the other side. I wanted to show you here exactly how to do the half double crochets into the cup because it might feel a little confusing or hard to do at first. You want to see if you can approximately get one half double crochet into each of the slip stitches that you did before. Your main point of concern should be to make sure that you don't end up having frills across this part of the piece. To avoid having them, if you see it frilling up, remove some of the half double crochets you did and continue across that way. It's a good indicator of whether or not you've had too many or too little. Turning your attention back to the video, look at where I'm crocheting into. Rather than looking for any specific stitch on the cup itself, I'm trying to just go into where the slip stitches themselves were, going through 1 or 2 loops, whatever is available. At this point, since they won't be pulling on the cup directly, it's okay if you only have 1 loop on your hook, as opposed to before where we wanted the slip knots to go to 2 instead of just 1. Continue to do this through both pieces of the cup, and I will see you at the end of this row. Once you're back at the far end of this row, you're going to chain 1 and cut your yarn, same as we did the last time we were cutting it. After this, you can choose to either weave in your ends, use a darning needle, or just use your hook. That's totally up to you. I personally just like to use my hook though. You should also take this time to lay your piece out and make sure that you like how it looks laying down and how it feels tied around your body. Depending on what you look like, your piece might look a little bit different than mine, but so long as the general shape is there, know that you're on the right track. You can now move on to what I'm calling row 3, but what's technically just the straps for the neck. Creating almost the exact same straps that we did for the sides, but this time doing 2 individually at the peak stitch of both cups, so that way you can tie them together on top as well as on your back. You'll start with a slip knot, same as you normally do, and then move to chaining 100 stitches. I know we've been doing a lot of chaining in this project, but this is how you get a nice thin strap that's still sturdy enough to hold its own weight. Go from the inside out part of your cups, this way you won't see the stitch once you pull it through, and connect the slip knot to the hook after you've already put it through the peak stitch. I'll leave the video slow for another moment, just so you can see exactly how I attached the yarn onto this part of the project. For this last row, you're simply just going to be chaining 1 and turn your work, then half double crocheting 1 into each stitch. So I know you can hear my dog. My sister's trying to teach him his lefts and rights, so ignore that. To finish up here, you will slip stitch back into the cup when you're done, chain 1, and then cut your piece. I just pulled mine right through since I didn't have much yarn left on the hook. What you'll do next is repeat this process to the other cup, and that will finish off the top of this whole project. I also thought it would be good to show you how I weave in my edges with a hook instead of a needle. I simply just find the stitch that I feel will be the strongest to push my ends through, and then pull it through the same way I would just do any old chain. Of course, you can do this with a darning needle. I just hate using them. So pull it through like this all the way up, and then I pull it through going down as well to attach these pieces together quite strongly. Once you pull it through the bottom, you can also choose to tie your pieces onto the piece itself, or you can just cut it wherever you see fit. Once you've done all that, your top is completed. Make sure that it fits you before moving on to the next part, but once you know that the top fits perfectly, you can move on to the bottom of the set. Welcome to part 3 of the video, making the bottoms of the set. I'd like to use a pair that I've made in the past to kind of show you what you're looking for in making this pair here. I also recommend you use a pair of your own underwear or bathing suit bottoms or just something that you want that fits you really well as a measure of how you want to do this part of the project. To do this part of the project, I recommend starting from the back or the part above your butt and then moving through to the top of the other side. So where I would normally go up and down like this, I think it'll be easier to move from the back to the front. Your first step to this part of the process is to either measure around your waist or to measure the length of the garment. Since I'm taking an old garment I've already made, I'm just counting how many crochets that I've done to get an approximate length for what I'm doing. Write down either the inch amount of your waist or the piece, and if you measured all the way around your waist, cut that by 2 because you only want to go for halfway around. For me, I end up doing 42 chains. I start this piece off with a slip knot and then I crochet the amount that I'd chosen before. Number will change depending on how small or long your waist is. Once you get to the other side, line up your new chain with either the reference garment or just the tape measure to make sure that it's the length that you want it to be. For row 2, you're not going to be chaining at all. Simply, you're just going to skip that first loop and then double crochet into the one afterwards. Your goal here is to begin decreasing as you move throughout the piece to make sure that you end up having smaller sides and not just one giant rectangle. Double crochet across the end and I'll meet you at the final stitch. To get this pattern throughout the entirety of your bottoms, you want to make sure you follow the chart that I'll be listing after this row. I'll be walking you through rows 3 and 4, and from that point onwards, you're going to need to reference the sheet to go through the rest of these parts of the project. Once again, without chaining your work, you're going to simply turn it over and then place a double crochet in the second stitch of this part of the piece. You want to work your way all the way down, continuing to do double crochets, and then making sure to not put one in the last stitch. Once again, you want to make sure that you're doing this without adding any chains to the back. So simply, you're just going to skip over that last stitch. Also, here's Oliver, he came over here. And you're just going to turn your work without chaining once again. Once you're now on the other side, you're going to do the same process once more. Don't chain or do anything, skip the first stitch, and add your double crochet into the next one. I will meet you at the start of row 5. Now that you know what you're doing, we're going to change things up a bit for row 5. You are now going to introduce chaining into this part of the process, which will end up making a more dramatic diagonal. So for row 5, you'll chain 1 and now skip the first and last 2 stitches, double crocheting into the one following. This marks the start of the patterns that I'm going to show you in this chart right here. This is also in your directions, but simply for the next couple rows, you're going to be following this pattern. Decreasing 2 means skipping the first and last 2, decreasing 3 is skipping the last 3, and so on and so forth. I did want to give you guys a small tutorial on how to do the decrease 3, even though it should be pretty self-explanatory. What you'll be doing after you chain and turn your work is a slip stitch. Same as you normally do them, but this time you'll be skipping the first 2, going into the second, then slip stitching again into the third, and afterwards you add your double crochet. This helps to keep the diagonal pattern from looking too chunky or from pulling at the yarn itself later on. At the end of the row, you simply just leave 3 stitches without double crochets in them. We pick back up here at row 11 so I can show you where to begin your evenly placed rows. Remember, at any point you can add more or less of a row to fit your own body, but I'm starting about here, which is where it would come like under your butt, and this is where I will be doing the evenly placed rows. While I only need to do 5 across, you may need to do maybe 4 across or 7 across. It totally just depends on your size. I wear a women's medium most of the time, so that should be a pretty good indicator, but of course measure it exactly to your own body. To do these rows, you're going to chain 2, and then simply double crochet once into each stitch, double crocheting 2 at the end and turning your work once more. It's extremely simple, and I will meet you back here afterwards for the increase rows. After you've done your even rows, we'll begin to finish up the piece by doing our increase rows. Depending on how high-waisted or anything you want them, you might be adding more increase rows here, but I like a thinner fit and a lower rise, so if you like the same, copy what I do. Start by chaining 2 and turn your work, Then you'll be doing one increasing stitch, which is 2 double crochets in one stitch, into the first and last stitches of each row. In between the increased stitches, you'll just be doing 1 double crochet into each stitch in between. Doing the increased stitches on both sides keeps your piece even, and it'll look really symmetrical when it's done. You do the ending increase the same way as the first one, making sure to put 2 double crochets into the last stitch. Continue this until you're done with row 23. Once you've finished the shape, line it up against yourself to make sure you like the fit, and if you do, it should look a little something like mine. You want to make sure that there's a slightly higher back row than there is in the front. This just fits better on the body. What we need to add to finish this off is the strings to tie the sides of the bottom. I'll be doing 35 chains, but depending on how thin or thick you are, you might need to do more or less than that. Keep in mind that even though the first one of these strings is attached to your piece already, the next ones that you'll be making, you'll need to do a slip knot first to attach it. Attach it the same way we've attached the other pieces in the past, such as the straps that we used to make the neck, but I'll show you that in a second. For now, to finish off this part of the piece, once you get to your 35, you'll cut your yarn and pull through the same way we normally do. You can choose to either weave in your ends now or later, but all you need to do is just tuck it into itself, or just whatever you would prefer to do, honestly. This is totally up to you how you want to hide them. I just like to pull the yarn in on itself like so, and then cut it again to make it tiny. And just to show you one more time, to attach one like so, you'll do a little slip knot, and then push it in through the back of the piece so you don't see it in the front. Push your hook through, then through your actual slip knot, and then pull it all the way through so that the string is on the opposite side. Very gently start chaining, and then weave in all your ends afterwards. You could absolutely call it here, trying it on to make sure it fits, or you can add little frills to the sides the same way we added to the cups at the top. To do so, you're going to start by making a slip knot, same way we've been doing it the whole time, and attaching it to both sides of the piece, one at a time. There's not really a way to do this all in one go, so you will have to do this twice, making your slip knot and attaching it to the right side, then making another slip knot and attaching it to the right. I'll show you how to do one side, and you'll do the other side on your own afterwards. Insert your slip knot through the back once again so that we don't see any of the leftover yarn trails, and then pull it through and chain 1. What you'll be doing for this is the exact same thing we did for the frills of the cup, where you simply single crochet 3 times into each and every stitch to make the little frills. Since the stitches are a bit harder to differentiate from each other on the sides of this piece, since there's no distinct top and bottom stitches, it's fine to just eyeball it and put them in wherever you see fit. There's not really a right or wrong amount here, just whatever looks good to you. Once you're doing it, you'll realize pretty soon how bunched up they are, if it's too many or too little. At the end of your row, you'll want to finish it off the same way we normally do, making sure that you simply slip stitch it in, then chaining 1, and then cutting your yarn and pulling it through. Once again, you do have to repeat this whole process to the other side, but then you'll be finished with the bottoms and the entire project. And just like that, you are done. Congratulations on making this set. I'm sure it might have been a little difficult for some of you, but great job for completing it. Please don't forget to like the video, comment what you want to see next, and subscribe to my channel. I make new videos every Tuesday and they upload on the afternoon. Also follow me on Instagram and Depop, where I post completed projects and updates on videos. Thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you all next week. Bye bye!